unscheduled news conference on Friday night that appears to have been a show for members of his Bedminster Golf Club. Many of the members walked into the ballroom without face coverings. They were very close together, not following any guidelines. This is a problem health-wise, bless you. Masks were eventually handed out before the president arrived. New Jersey's social distancing guidelines were also completely ignored after reporters raised concerns. The Washington Post says a club official told the crowd to, quote, spread out a little because tweets are going out. Really? What about your life? When asked about the lack of safety precautions, the president played to his audience.
You said that the pandemic is disappearing, but we lost 6,000 Americans this week. And just in this room, you have dozens of people who are not following the guidelines in New Jersey, which say you should not have.
No, they don't have. This is a political activity. You're wrong on that because it's a political activity. They have exceptions, political activity, and it's also a peaceful protest. So when you have, and as you know, they asked if they could be, a number of, and to me they look like they all have, pretty much all have masks on, but, you have an exclusion in the law. It says peaceful protest or political activity, right? In fact, specifically, it says exactly political activity or peaceful protest, and you could call it political activity, but I'd call it peaceful protest because they heard you were coming up, and they know the news is fake. They understand it better than anybody. And they asked whether or not they can be here.
Again, constant attacking me of the news. I mean, it is, again, that's what autocrats do. That's what dictators throughout history have done. We're not saying, obviously, that Donald Trump's a dictator. He can't be because Madison had checks and balances that ensure that he can't do the kind of things that he's trying to do. And that he can be checked by courts and he can be checked by the press. But again, he goes to his country club, a group of people are around, and then they're told to put on masks not because over 150,000 Americans have died, not because their own safety is at risk, but they're told that tweets are going out showing them not doing what every doctor and what every medical provider is telling them to do. It's a cult. It's just a cult.
Well,
it's a cult that ignores science. It's a cult that ignores what epidemiologists who've been studying pandemics their entire lives have been saying. It is a cult that ignores scientists. And they think they're proving something by getting sick and getting their parents sick and killing other people around them. No, they're not proving anything other than they're putting their own cult-like beliefs ahead of their own safety and the safety of others around them. It's bizarre. Again, it's one thing when you were in that cult and believing the lies about Robert Mueller, you were in that cult and you were believing the lies about Russia, or you were in that cult, you were believing the lies that the president said about Ukraine, the perfect call. That's one thing. But now you're going all in. All over America, people refusing to wear masks, people suggesting that this is a conspiracy led by Anthony Fauci and George Soros. I mean, come on, it's gotten to such extremes that senior citizens in Florida are dying, senior citizens in Arizona are dying, senior citizens across America are dying, and guess what? A lot of kids are getting infected too. Guess what?
That's right.
That picture of that Georgia hallway, who's surprised? Now we're finding out that kids in that hallway have been infected with the coronavirus. And yet members of Donald Trump's cult, instead of focusing on the pandemic and protecting themselves, protecting their loved ones, protecting the economy, protecting America, instead, they're cheering when Donald Trump bashes members of the press. Yes, this will be written for generations to come. And yes, Donald Trump, and especially Republicans in the Senate, will be the ones found guilty of negligent behavior that killed a lot of Americans.
So I agree with everything that you've said about the consequences of people dying because they're not following the guidelines. And this president is setting the worst example ever and has botched this pandemic. Almost looks purposeful. It's so bad. It's so bad. But at the very top, you said that this is what dictators do, and it won't be allowed because of Madison's checks and balances. Tell me what hasn't been allowed in this presidency. He may have been criticized by the military, by the intelligence community, but what exactly hasn't been allowed so far as we head into an election where it appears the Postal Service is being sabotaged? I just want to understand exactly where the checks and balances are that are actually stopping corrupt, unlawful behavior.
Well, you could go all the way back to the first week of the presidency. You could look at the courts that struck down his first two so-called Muslim bans. And wouldn't allow those so-called Muslim bans to go into effect until they were drafted in a way that was constitutional, that didn't violate people's constitutional rights. So you could go through 3.5 years of judicial rulings that time and again have held the President of the United States in check, all the way to the decision this past month from the Supreme Court that said the state of New York could have access to Donald Trump's tax records for the purposes of a pending investigation, a possible criminal investigation. You could look not just at the judiciary, you could look at the military and their response to June the 1st after making an egregious error. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs the next day came out, made a very strong, definitive statement and rebuked the President of the United States, and then went on video link and apologized to every member of the armed services, every man and woman, every fellow general, admiral, every private. Yes, there have been checks and there have been balances in real time. The House of Representatives impeached the President of the United States. And he impeached the President of the United States because he used his office of the presidency to leverage foreign aid to a country who had been invaded by Russia to try to get dirt on his political opponent.
And has that stopped him?
Those facts are very clear. And guess what? Just like the Republican House of Representatives faced the music in 2018 and lost by the greatest landslide margin in the history of this republic in terms of voting, those senators that voted earlier this year to allow a commander-in-chief to use his position to leverage a foreign leader who was under attack by a foreign country, the Russians, to get dirt on Donald Trump's domestic opponent, every one of those senators will have to face voters this year. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.